Hi, everybody. Welcome to the conversation we're having with Drake today about PBX Ideate. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Katie Green, the principal advocate here at Chameleon, and I am joined by Drake. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. I'm Drake. I'm the Director of AI Product and Growth at Gain, particularly Gain Conversion. I have some very exciting information and content to share with you guys today.
Great. So at Unite Summit, you did an excellent job walking us through the tool. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about the background of what powers PBX Ideate. But give us our little spiel, our introduction here. Tell the people about Ideate and what's so great about it. And then I'll ask you some questions.
So PBX Ideate is the result of a cool partnership between Gain and Chameleon. It takes Gain's product Lupin, which tells people what to test and why, and is based in conversions, methodologies, and frameworks and approaches to CRO to give ideas and ideate. And then it sends that over to Chameleon's PBX, which is able to AI code gen and create some of these variants and show them in real time, and then eventually get things all the way to execution and production. So the marriage of these two things is sort of addressing almost full stack experimentation all the way from ideation until the end of the process and running the test.
That is quite possibly the best summary I've ever heard of PBX Ideate. So thank you so much for that. Give us a little bit more about the use case, right? So people who are going to be listening to this recording, whether it lives in its full extent here or not, but people who are going to be listening to us on the internet, wherever this may live, can you tell us a little bit more about the use case and what success stories you've seen coming out of this partnership we have?
Definitely. I think for the PBX Ideate use case, it's largely people who want to move faster. It's people who are interested in experimentation velocity. And I think there are two main bottlenecks to experimentation velocity nowadays. First of which is, actually executing it, having the dev person power to, run more tests, build them, and then eventually launch them. The second bottleneck is knowing what to test, the ideation piece of it, the part that the CRO industry typically credits to, analysis paralysis, deciding, hey, here's where the problem is, here's where the insights are, and understanding what levers to pull and, what they should be experimenting on. And that's the pieces that PBX and Ideate address.
Another great answer. You're killing it, Drake. All right. The question that I get first when I'm talking about PBX Ideate is, how are these test ideas generated? Where are they coming from? Can you tell us a little bit more about the background of how it generates those ideas and helps people with the analysis paralysis?
Of course. So some good context here is Lupin, or, the PBX Ideate, is born out of Gain Conversion. Gain Conversion is one of the world's leading experimentation, service providers, offering services at the very top of the market across 15 years, 20,000 experiments. And, these learnings have been aggregated to, build a very strong methodology, an approach to CRO and an approach to experimentation. So Lupin, or PBX Ideate, attempts to consolidate that in a way that is, accessible to everyone and is democratizable. And the way this starts is, first we look at observations and components on a website when we do a scan. We're able to see, hey, we realize you're using, like a double stacked navigation bar, or, hey, you're using these circular icons a lot, or perhaps the information above the fold doesn't say enough about what's going on in the site or what you're actually offering. Identifies these problems, and then it's able to look into some of the causes and understand, here's why some of these problems are occurring. We go to hypotheses. Here's what if we were able to change something like this, and we send it all the way to an execution, an experiment, and it has a couple of different variants. Ultimately, each part of this reasoning chain is grounded in logic, it's grounded in evidence, and it's grounded in, some of conversions, practices, patterns, and learnings over the last, 15, 20 years of being in the space and being one of the front runners. So that's where these ideas are coming from. They're coming from conversion expertise.
I think a lot of people end up with a ton of ideas, right? where either they're coming from a tool like this or a really passionate team that is doing a ton of UX research. But no matter where the tests are coming from, how are they prioritized in PBX Ideate? Because I think the challenge that people have is if they don't have enough ideas, they're just drowning in ideas and they're like, okay, well, we can't test 100 things in the same day. So give us a little bit more about prioritization and how folks can expect that from PBX.
Totally. Prioritization is such an important concept, when you have a backlog of ideas, or, when the bottleneck is, less about having new ideas because you have something like Lupin or PBX Ideate. Excuse me. Now, prioritization within these tools is from Gain Conversion's Confidence AI. Confidence AI is an ML model that's trained on conversions levers. It's trained on a number of different, test outcomes and results and past tests. And it's able to say, hey, here's what's more likely to win on a scale from 0 to 10. So each of the ideas you'll see in PBX Ideate or in Lupin will have, these Confidence AI scorings. Basically tells what's more likely to win.
I've been loving showing this tool to some of our prospects, and some of them ask, oh, can I put my own framework into I know you're nodding your head like, yep, I've heard this one before. What do you think the future of PBX Ideate is?
Good question.
Or generally like AI in ideation. Like it doesn't have to be specific to this, but I'm just curious, like, where do you see the next step? It's able to read the page, give you recommendations, prioritize it. What's next?
Totally. So I do think that there's always more robustness that can be built in. Of course, all of these tools are fairly early stage. The ideas from Lupin can get better. The execution from PBX can always get better. It can get faster for both of them. I do think that there's a number of things on the Lupin roadmap. There's a number of things on the PBX roadmap that we want to keep kind of quiet and, have the big release and launch moments when they're fully ready. So I feel maybe we'll keep some of those for the big moments. What is coming for the future of, AI within experimentation? I think there have been a lot of interesting use cases, and I think we should start there for what's currently being done. For example, I got to see a little bit of Iqbal Ali's Rasada, which is basically taking in, qualitative information like surveys, feedback, and is able to sort of aggregate and summarize them. Have also seen some other use cases, that are trying to help, decipher data, try to, like my old startup SiteWiz, we attempted to look through a lot of session recordings and heat maps and, show takeaways and what the next step could be from there. I think there's a lot of aggregation. That's what AI is really good at, and what I think the next step is when it's able to take a mass amount of information that previously an analyst had to go through and spend hours, or maybe they couldn't even afford the time to decipher this info. I think AI has been really good at, and will continue to be really good at, churning out what the important takeaways are, in a way that could almost be like a junior employee, sort of filling that role. What are your thoughts on this? I'm curious what you think.
I know,
Maybe you disagree.
Right? I mean, I feel like my thoughts on the future is it's constantly evolving because I'm in conversations with prospects all the time and they range in size. So I hate to give the super diplomatic answer of it really depends on the scale of which your experimentation is at, right? I think that one of the issues that I personally struggle with is one of the things we say about PBX Ideate is that the model has a 63% accuracy on high confidence predictions. That's the number that we found in our research with you and our partnership with you. Does that mean people should just stop brainstorming? Should they just let the AI do it? If 63%, that's higher than what a human can generate. If 63% is the number, should we just be letting it bake for us? Where does human creativity come in? So that's kind of my challenge right now. But the overall future of experimentation, I really am interested in more of those analysis barriers right now, where exactly what you're saying, right? Where SiteWiz was your company was taking that information and distilling it. I worked at Quantum Metric and they have Felix, which takes session replay data and all of that and turns it into an actual insight. That's the hardest part, is democratization of insights. And when you have the ability to go so fast in your ideation and development, then you get to analysis. And it feels like there's, in my opinion, there's a bit of a wall there where you need to, okay, now we have to go through the data, come up with the insights. And yeah, you can use Claude and, Gemini, whatever tool you're using to go through it. But you have to create a product that centralizes it. Because if we're expecting our partners to have centers of excellence, the tools need to be a center of excellence in and of themselves. So that's my answer.
Absolutely. And I think there's some strong merit to the unification effort that you're sort of addressing. And that was actually where Site was first started. At first, we wanted to try to, unify a lot of the different data sources and a lot of the different silos that exist within e-commerce teams. And the difficulty there was, some of the different tools and resources aren't always so prone to sharing the information inside to, third parties. And of course, there's like a privacy and, data regulation to look out for. But I do think that there's some merit in, unification. At the same time, I've also been hearing that people aren't so dashboard agnostic anymore, where perhaps people want to be fed information, not necessarily through another thing to log into, another thing to sign up for, but perhaps something that, comes to them and perhaps can give them a heads up about it, or it can be as close to an assistant or as close to another employee as possible. So I've been seeing a lot of hype around that within the AI space. But you also brought up an interesting point earlier, which is where does human creativity still come into play in a world where, there's 65% accuracy and climbing for, different AI capabilities around experimentation, ideation, and execution. I think it's ultimately, and humans have to, call the shots. They have to pull the trigger on some of these things, and they have to make sure the guardrails are in place. You have to make sure the context aligns. And ultimately, they're the final decision maker. The goal of AI tools is not to take the fun part out of everyone's lives. It's to take all the boring, difficult, time-consuming pieces out of everyone's life so that they can do the things that they enjoy. They can talk about strategy. They can talk about direction. They can talk about governance. Maybe governance is a little bit less fun within a couple of organizations. But it is a very human task. AI can't sell the idea to the rest of an organization and navigate through the internal politics. Yeah, it can help as a singular source of truth, but it's a source of truth that has to be spoken by someone within an organization to get buy-in. So I do think there's a lot of direction setting. There's a lot of ownership that still has to happen within AI tools, even despite the fact that AI is good at, sometimes being very creative and good at telling us what the answer we were looking for is, or the answer we didn't know existed is.
That's the conversation I have so much, is people are like, well, am I going to have to fire somebody for this? Right. And no, somebody still has to do it. I'm curious. This is more for me, Drake, but like AI hallucination, right? Yeah. That exists. AI hallucinates. Are there any guardrails built into this to prevent that?
Of course. And, there are a lot of folks who are building AI solutions in a bunch of different industries, and that's one of the main questions. So everyone has a different approach. Can't necessarily spill all the secret sauce about how Lupin does this, but there are a lot of guardrails in place. At SiteWiz, there were a lot of different scores involved in the process. There was a lot of going back and forth to make sure everything was reliable and verifiable. That's what I think the biggest counter to hallucination is. If the way that you show your evidence, the way that you show your outputs are displayed in a way that's transparent, in a way that's verifiable, for anyone who's, the audience of the output. And Lupin does this too. That's why we show, within the tool, we show components, we show observations, we show the scan of the page so that people can see, hey, Lupin understands this about, my page. It's why in PBX Ideate, you can see the website, as you're looking through the ideas, so you can consistently go back and forth and make sure everything is accurate to the thresholds that you care about. So I do think, yeah, humans are a great way to guard against hallucination, but technically, of course, there are plenty of guardrails to make sure everything is accurate, and there are confidence scores baked in everywhere to make sure that, things are trustworthy. Because tools that miss all the time begin to erode at the confidence and the trust. Now, it's of course expected with all AI. AI gives things that are non-deterministic, meaning there isn't necessarily a correct answer. So of course there will be some interpretation all the time. That doesn't mean that the AI was wrong. It doesn't mean that the output is unusable. It just means that, you should take it for what it is and try to extract the value out of it in what it is able to tell you.
Excellent. It's just mostly for me, right? I'm the one who's picky about that, but really good to hear your perspective on that. Another question I have for you is a lot of teams in experimentation struggle with the winning versus learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make sure I'm hitting a certain win rate? I'm getting the learnings I want. Does PBX Ideate Lupin, does that prioritize proven things that are most likely to win? Or does it prioritize those big swings that teams are really looking to see?
It's a combination of both. When you get ideas from Lupin or PBX Ideate, you will get a combination of ideas that are offering bigger changes, and you'll get also some that aren't offering as big swings. They're smaller changes that, equally for a site with a lot of traffic and, a lot of interaction could be impactful. And this is the case at, conversion as well. Sometimes it's small changes, sometimes it's big changes that create big motion in the bottom line. So yeah, ultimately I do think that, ultimately Lupin and PBX Ideate are grounded in things that have historically won, but they also take into account unique context. For example, a specific website may have in a certain industry may have a different audience. It may have a different context than another company in the same industry. So Lupin is able to account for that and talk about what the unique value propositions are. It's able to talk about what's special and what's unique to that business in a way that can tailor the ideas and can tailor the reasoning, the root causes, the problems that are surfaced to who's actually listening. It's not generic. I know there's been a huge war against best practices within the experimentation within the CRO space, and best practices, it's a touchy topic. What wins on one site may not necessarily win on another site, even if it was tested. And Lupin is something that takes this into account. It takes this business context. It does recommend ideas that can work, and it recommends new ideas as well.
I want to double down on the business context piece, because we will see people using this tool that are selling a $25 t-shirt. We will see people using this tool that are selling a $20,000 enterprise SaaS solution. The question being that, and this is again something that I'm struggling with when I'm having conversations with people, is they're like, okay, I work at a bank and
Right.
I'm, and then another person I'm talking to is like, I have a SaaS solution that's for enterprise businesses only. I sell a $25 t-shirt. Yeah. How can the same tool work for all of these people?
Again, Lupin and PBX Ideate follow the same process and rigor and methodology that a lot of the top agencies like Conversion follow. And, these folks serve companies that are selling $25 t-shirts. They serve companies that are selling $20,000 offerings, jewelry even. So the same way that these practitioners are able to serve a range of folks within the space by understanding the business context and understanding the value propositions, Lupin takes into account the same types of contexts.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, the last thing I want to ask you is the tangibility question, right? If somebody is watching us talk, they're watching this interview, they're seeing a clip on LinkedIn, if they're a practitioner, what is your recommendation for what they do tomorrow to get into PBX Ideate Lupin, get into, speeding up that part of their experimentation workflow?
Totally. I actually think, and this might be a little counterintuitive, something I recommend people do is to try out the generalist LLMs, like Claude Code, like OpenAI, 5.4 just recently released as of, a few days ago. And the reason why I would encourage people counterintuitively to try out these tools is to understand and have your own opinion as to what the range what the level of capability for these tools are. And ultimately, one of Gain's theses at, within conversion as well is it's these humans that have human-driven expertise that have been doing it for years and years and know all the details about an industry, that have all this domain knowledge, have this domain expertise that, surpasses those of generalist LLMs. If you ask an LLM to come up with ideas, it can do that, but the point is ideas are sort of cheap. And even, code can be cheap as well. What's important is that it's logically driven and verifiable executions, or ideas where you can follow along, you can see the reasoning, and, there's verifiable complexity. So would encourage everyone to try out these LLM, and new things come up all the time. Perplexity Computer just came out and I was trying it out the other day. Would encourage everyone to take on this, try it out sort of mentality with all the LLMs that are constantly getting better. And I think forming that opinion will, one, it'll build a little bit more of an appreciation for the tools that are focused on industries like PBX Ideate, and it'll allow you to think for yourself and make evaluations and choices about, where tools are offering real value and, where some of the tools aren't. Truth is there's a lot of AI slop out there, and a lot of people are able to spin up projects over a weekend with vibe coding and, whether it's Lovable, whether it's Perplexity Computer. And, the folks who spent more time and more thought and more effort in making these tools, valuable and go the extra mile, like, I think you should have the ability to judge that and put on your thinking caps for yourself.
I would recommend that for anybody looking to speed up any part of their experimentation workflow, right? That was such a great response for quite literally everything we do between our partnership, right? I would love to have more people who are very educated in the space come in here, because it makes it that much more impressive. And to see PBX in action and say, it's just really a part of your team. It's not just another tool. And I love how passionate you are about it and all the wonderful things you've had to say. We absolutely love chatting with you, and our partnership means everything. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk us through PBX Ideate and Lupin. It's really cool stuff. And I hope that anybody who's watching this can understand more about what they can do to get a taste of this. But the waitlist is live for people to try Ideate right now. So on chameleon.com, you can go to chameleon.com/PBX-Ideate and join the waitlist. We have 5 spots open per week. So jump in there, get a demo, try out some of the other LLMs, get your feet wet. But you can always come to us, and we are offering some free opportunities to play with tools like PBX. But thank you so much, Drake, for your time. And
thank you, Katie.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.